I'm just about to press start then.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this webinar event celebrating the success of the Our Past, Our Future Landscape Partnership Scheme. My name is Patrick Hennigan. I'm a member of the New Forest National Park Authority, and it is my privilege to be the chair of the OPOF board, which brings together the various partners involved in delivering our 21 projects. Since 2016, the £4.4 million National Lottery Heritage Funded Scheme has restored New Forest habitats and heritage sites, given people new skills, and inspired a new generation to champion and care for the New Forest. With the scheme now drawing to an end, we would like to take this opportunity to celebrate all that the partnership has achieved and to consider the work that lies ahead in the future. For obvious reasons, it has not been possible to reschedule the celebration we had planned for last April at Foxborough, but we still want to mark the occasion and give you an opportunity to hear about some of the work that has taken place during the scheme. However, as we're broadcasting from assorted living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms and barns, it is possible that we will experience the odd technical hitch or poor broadband connection. Please bear with us should this be the case. Normal service will be resumed as soon as possible. As well as being a celebration, this webinar also forms part of the virtual New Forest Awakening Festival, which is exploring our response to the current climate and nature emergencies. The festival will include a series of events during February, which will increase people's understanding of the issues in the New Forest and how we can all help respond to the twin crises. More details regarding the Awakening Festival can be found on the National Park Authority website. Now, just a few words on the format for the event. You can see the agenda on your screen, and this will be available throughout by the Q&A sidebar on the right-hand side of your webinar screen. We are recording the event, which means that for the next 3 months, you can re-watch via the same link at your leisure. In due course, those unable to join us today will be able to view at their convenience on YouTube. Whilst it is a busy agenda, we do want to encourage as much audience participation as possible. To this end, please feel free to type any questions that you may have for presenters in the aforementioned Q&A bar. Each presenter will then address as many of these as possible at the end of their section. If we don't have time for all your questions during the webinar itself, you will receive a response after the event concludes. The second way for you to participate is via a series of 3 live polls that will be conducted during the event. Each poll will include a random prize draw for a hamper full of local goodies from the New Forest Hamper Company. As each poll is announced, you'll be invited to click on a link that will appear in the Q&A sidebar. Once you reach the poll page, just follow the on-screen instructions and enter your response. You will be asked to enter your email address, but this will be deleted immediately after each prize draw is made. Now, I hope that you will find this webinar interesting, informative, stimulating, and maybe even inspirational. But for now, with no further delay, I'll hand over to our OPOF delivery manager, Rachel Gallagher.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello and welcome to everybody who's watching the webinar this afternoon. I've just seen on our chat that we've got about 100 people watching, so great turnout. So thank you everybody for attending. We've got some really good outputs and outcomes to share with you this afternoon through a number of presentations. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the scheme, but obviously you're going to get a lot more detail from some of the other presentations that are going to follow mine. But first we wanted to get you involved. So as Patrick mentioned, we've got 3 live polls that are going to be happening. The first one is already launched. I'm going to, hopefully a lot of you have been able to get onto that link through the Q&A chat. I'm just going to share my screen now so we can actually see some of those results as they're coming in. So great, we've had well, 28 people have completed that at the moment, so a lot of volunteers I can see in there, and apprentices mentioned a couple of times, and more people coming in all the time. So that's going to be really useful for us to be able to see who's actually been attending the event this afternoon. I'm just going to go. I'm just going to share now my presentation with you, because I've got a few PowerPoint slides, so we can have some sort of visuals while I'm talking as well. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a recap, because not all of you would have been involved in the scheme from the beginning, so just to sort of show you where it's come from. So Our Past, Our Future is a landscape partnership scheme. So it's been funded through the National Lottery Heritage Fund, through their landscape partnership budget stream. And that sort of stream is really about funding projects which really look at the whole landscape, so the whole heritage, the natural heritage, the built heritage, but also the social and cultural heritage as well. Because it's all these things that help make up the landscape that we live in. So the boundary of our landscape partnership scheme is the New Forest National Park, shown on the map in this slide. But the work we've done sort of on the ground has really been focused on those areas of the national park that are in private ownership, so not the sort of open forest land, forestry England lands, but and the Crown lands, but more the sort of privately owned lands. We've got 11 different partners who've been leading on one or more of the projects within the scheme, and all their logos are shown on this slide, and that's some of the partners at our launch event back in 2015. The vision of OPOF is up here: to ensure the New Forest's distinctive landscape survives through future change and modern day pressure. So that's what we've been trying to do. We had a grant of about we had a budget, sorry, of 4.3 million, and the grant from the National Lottery Heritage Fund was 2.8 million. So that's allowed us to do a lot of this work. Also funding from various of the partners and other organisations as well. We've the actual landscape partnership scheme is made up of 21 different projects, and broadly falling within 3 different themes. So I'm just going to talk briefly about each of these themes, but as I mentioned earlier, we have got presentations coming up specifically about each of these where you'll hear more information. So this is just really to give you a bit of a feel for the type of work that we've done. So the first theme was called Restoring Lost Landscapes, and this was really about practical work to look at the management of the open forest and to protect the natural environment and the built heritage. And we had a number of projects under this which are listed there. I'm not going to go through them all. So firstly, just to give you 3 slides just to sort of demonstrate some of the work we've done. This was the tree planting that was done at the Foxborough Reserve, where they planted 18,000 trees. Another example is work to improve hedgerows and boundary features. This is like a newly laid hedge that was done through that project. Another project which removed the invasive plant species like the Himalayan balsam. This is a project that the Wildlife Trust have led on over the last 5 years. So that's sort of habitats and species type projects, but I also mentioned the Restoring Lost Landscapes also covered archaeology and heritage as well. So just a few examples, because Hilda will be talking more in detail about this in a moment. We worked on churchyard monuments, so this photo here shows some work to restore a monument in Lyndhurst churchyard. Also work on significant archaeological features such as barrows, and this is the one on National Trust land at Stagbury Hill, where it was cleared of vegetation in order to get it off the monuments at risk register. A lot of projects to do with World War II monuments. This is just an example of Ibsley Watch Tower, which was cleared of vegetation by volunteers, and this shows a laser scan which was taken, which is going to help with future conservation work. And also the Verdurers Hall was one of the projects which the Forestry England led on, whereby we did some restoration works inside and outside, and some improved interpretation as well to help make it more accessible to the public. So the second theme that the scheme has looked at is about developing forest skills. And this is about traditional rural skills and trying to keep these alive in the New Forest. And Julie is going to talk about this in a bit, but just to again touch on some of the examples of this work. We've had the apprentice rangers, and these are the apprentices from last year. We've had a mentoring scheme whereby experienced commoners have been able to pass on their knowledge and experience to young and new commoners. We've done a number of courses which were aimed at land managers and landowners to help them with rural skills. An example here showing a hedge laying course. And then also we had a number of courses about building skills as well, traditional building skills. These are aimed at homeowners, with builders and agents. And a photo just showing there of a lime mortar course that was held. So the third theme was about discovering forest heritage, and this is really about finding ways of getting people to understand more about the heritage of the New Forest and therefore care for it in the future. We had a number of different projects in this theme. Lindsay Stride is going to be talking in a bit about some of the projects in relation to the commoning aspects that were under this theme, but I just wanted to touch on a few others as well. So we had an arts festival in 2016 and another one in 2017, which was a 2-week festival of various arts events, and I've just shown some photos there of examples of those and some of the organisations that helped put those on. We've had wild play sites. We've actually built 3 wild play sites in partnership with Parish Council. So there's one at Sway, one in Ashurst and one in Holbury, and the whole aim of these is to enable children to sort of play in nature and get more connection with the natural environment. Also had quite a bit of on the ground interpretation. A couple of examples shown here at Forestry England sites at Boulderwood. There some improvements to the interpretation at the site there, and the giant seed sculptures that have been built at the Blackwater Arboretum. Also some interpretation to help interpret the work that we've done through the Restoring Habitats as well. So there's a couple of examples of panels that have been put in, one at Avon Tyrrell, sorry, in the bottom right, and one at Tatchbury Mountain Hospital in the top left there. We've also had numerous events and exhibitions, too many to mention, but these 2 pictures just show an exhibition that was held in 2017 at the New Forest Show and also the New Forest Heritage Centre, which was all about trees of the New Forest, and we actually had people making these little figures, and they were then made into a stop frame animation film, which you can see on our YouTube. Another area of work under this theme was to do with walking as well, and we've developed 5 new heritage trails where people can follow a specific walk and find out more about the heritage of the area. And then also we've had walking festivals held every year where hundreds of people have been able to get out and experience the forest with guided walks. So that was the 3 themes that we've had, and over through the whole scheme as well, we've wanted to sort of monitor and evaluate what we've been doing, because we obviously want to make sure that what we're doing is making a difference, not only to the biodiversity and the heritage, but also the people in the communities as well. So I've just got a couple of slides to look at this. We've had monitoring biodiversity, so all the work that has been done to restore habitats, we've wanted to make sure that that is actually having an improvement, and I'm sure Julie will talk a bit more about this in her talk about habitats. We had a number of targets, of course, that we all had to meet for all the different projects, and all of these have been met and many have actually been exceeded. I just wanted to show you this infographic which we've just produced. We had one of these done at the beginning, halfway through the scheme, and now this is the final one, which really sort of demonstrates all the number of things that we've produced. I won't go through this in detail, but just to pick out some highlights there. 213 hectares of habitats have been restored, 108 monuments restored, 157 courses have trained over 3,000 people, and over 700 events attended by 133,000 people. So, you know, quite a lot has been achieved, I hope you agree, over the last 5 years. As we're coming towards the end, we've actually now produced a final newsletter or leaflet, 24-page colour leaflet, which covers highlights from all the different projects. This is now available on our website address is there. We also have got some printed copies as well, so if people do feel they'd like a printed copy, let me know when we can get those out to you. Obviously, we had been hoping we would have been handing these out to you had we had the live event actually in Foxborough last year, but that's not been possible, so we have got that on the website now. We've also been able to make a number of films as well about some of the outcomes and the successes that we've had. Some of these films are going to be shown as part of the presentations this afternoon, but they'll also all be available on our YouTube channel. Also, we've wanted to evaluate what we've done. We wanted to look back and see what's been successful and why. We've had consultants, Resources for Change, have been working with us throughout the scheme. Many of you may have been involved in giving feedback to them, which has all helped go into the evaluation report. They've come out with some sort of key success stories of what's been successful and why, and I'm just going to touch quickly on these. One of the biggest success stories has been the volunteering that we've been able to do through the scheme. Richard's going to talk about this in a bit. He's got a whole presentation about volunteering, but I just wanted to pick up on this particular graph from the report, which is what people say they valued most about the volunteering opportunities. And you can see there's all sorts of things they value, but just to pick out a few, it's helping to look after the forest, being active and outdoors and learning something about the forest as well. So we really hope that we can continue to make these opportunities available for people in the future once our Past Our Future has actually ended in a few months. The second highlight, and one of the factors for the success of the scheme, has been the collaborative way of working. The scheme has encouraged a culture of collaboration between all the different organisations that maybe wasn't happening quite the same way before. A really good example of this is the relationship between the commoners and other key forest organisations who are now all able to give consistent messages to protect the forest. And I think Lindsay will say a bit more of that specific bit later. So this is really important for the legacy, because going forward we continue now to build on those really good relationships and can work together after off. And the third sort of key success story was the partnership working that we've actually been able to do. We're all now looking holistically at the forest and working together to achieve the same aims. And the evaluation puts that down to a number of factors. So the commitment from everybody that's involved, not just the organisations, but the volunteers and everybody else who's had some role to play in the scheme. The leadership with the National Park taking a sort of core lead role. The ongoing management and coordination of the partnership, the communication between all the different organisations, but ultimately the trust that's been built up as well. So that's sort of the end of my main presentation. But lastly, I just wanted to thank all the funders for the grants that we've had to enable all this fantastic work to happen. And also, sort of while I've got the stage as well, it's just my opportunity to say thank you to everybody as well who's been involved and making it a really great scheme that we've been able to do. So that's the end of my formal presentation, and I'm just now going to check to see whether I've got any questions, and it seems like I don't have any questions to answer. So without any more to do, we can move straight on to Julie Milling-Stubbs, who's now going to give you some more information about some of the projects that have restored some of the habitats in the New Forest. So I'll hand over now to Julie.
So good afternoon, everybody, and my name is Julie Milling-Stubbs, and I manage the New Forest Land Advice Service. And it's my great pleasure this afternoon to do a short presentation for you, which just goes through some of the fantastic project work that's been going on through this scheme to restore habitats and the species within them around the New Forest area. Within the New Forest Land Advice Service, myself and Gemma Stride and Angela Peters have been delivering 3 projects, the Better Boundaries, Working Woodlands and Nature Stepping Stones projects. And then 4 of our partners have also been delivering fantastic projects, which I'll just touch on. So to start off with Better Boundaries, Rachel shared a lovely photograph of a laid hedge, and one of the problems that we've got in the New Forest, and in fact across Britain at the moment, is that some hedgerows aren't being managed in a way that makes them really good for wildlife. And in the New Forest, that is a problem, and the New Forest Land Advice Service is really keen, just in our day-to-day work, to give landowners advice on how to manage their hedgerows better and the best way of planting new native hedgerows. But this lottery project has given us the opportunity to actually fund 4 kilometres of hedgerow in the western part of the New Forest, working with 12 landowners on 12 holdings. So that's been just an absolutely incredible opportunity for us to really provide very important habitat, bird nesting areas and food supplies for birds and other wildlife. These are some of the problems that we come across, where the hedgerows have either changed into lines of trees or they've become very gappy over time. And what's really important is that we can teach people how to rectify that and how to recreate their wildlife corridors across their land. So here's an example of one that we did in Hyde. Originally, the hedgerow had been grubbed out in the past and had been replaced by this fence. And through this project, we were able to plant a lovely double hedgerow with hedgerow trees within it. And you can see there at the bottom what it looked like 3 years later, starting to establish. And the monitoring that the biodiversity monitoring project carried out for us at a lot of the sites where we worked actually showed here, you can see the blue arrows on the diagram on the right hand side, that bats had started to use that hedgerow only a year after we'd first planted it. The project has involved quite a lot of people, not just ourselves, but also hedge laying contractors, other local contractors who've helped us to coppice hedgerows and plant hedgerows, people who've been on courses to learn how to manage their own hedgerows, and then also, of course, our very valuable volunteers who've also helped us on certain sites. Moving on to working woodlands, this project has worked with more than 30 private landowners to restore about 130 hectares of woodland. There are a lot of privately owned, very small woodlands in the New Forest, and a lot of them aren't actively managed. And actually, there are a lot of benefits to managing woodlands, not just environmental benefits, but also the social and economic benefits that you can get from managing a woodland. So, for example, at Fish Ponds Peace, one of the woodlands where we've worked, we've removed huge swathes of very invasive non-native rhododendron ponticum from that woodland, and the volunteers have helped us to do that. Although we have also had to use contractors on that site because there was so much rhododendron there. And what that's done is opened up the forest floor for all the native species to come through and attract all of the butterflies and other invertebrates that you get when you have all of those native species there. Another site, Harrow Woods, a very different site here. It used to be a conifer plantation, and it's got lots of self-seeded conifers and birch in there now, and also a huge amount of rhododendron. So that site is very heathy, and we identified early on that there was the potential for there to be some fantastic heathland habitat in there as well as the woodland. So we've gone in there, a lot of volunteers have helped us out, and we've created lots of glades and open rides, taken out the rhododendron, and we've got the heather coming back in there now, and lots of invertebrates and birds using the site. It's a much more diverse, interesting woodland than it was before. Another example with the Woodland Project, a little cluster of woodlands near Lymington, where again we've been able to make a few different improvements, different types of things in each of these woodlands, some areas of thinning in order to create glades which are better for wildlife, and we've been able to use working horses in order to pull the timber out of that woodland and a couple of the other woodlands where we've worked, just to ensure that the pressure on the woodland is kept to a minimum, and that also we're supporting local rural skills. So we've had an explosion of bluebells in one or two of those woodlands as a result of what we've been doing there. And we've also got some really excellent data from the monitoring project, which shows very much enhanced use of one of those woodlands in particular by bats, including Bechstein's bat, which is quite an unusual bat. And also, if you look at this graph about the birds, you can see that there was a dip during the restoration phase of the woodland, of this particular woodland in 2018, which you'd expect with all the work going on. But then if you look to see how many numbers and species of birds have come back into that woodland compared with before we began, you can see that's been a really big increase. And then Nature Stepping Stones was the other Land Advice Service project. This was concentrating more on grassland sites, little pockets of land around the New Forest, owned mainly by private landowners, little precious pieces that have just not really been managed appropriately, could be managed better. and we've gone into those grasslands. We've carried out lots of surveys. We've done certain amount of scrub removal on some of them where appropriate, and we've introduced conservation grazing into those sites, just to make sure that they're absolutely as best that they can be for nature. So here's an example of another site where we've managed to really improve the species diversity of the grassland there. You can see the wildflowers, and we've used a local commoner's native sheep species breed to come in and help us to do the conservation grazing on that site. And again, we've got some really good data showing the increase in birds and invertebrates on some of those sites. So we can really see some of those successes coming through. And then moving on to 4 amazing projects that have been done by our partners to do with habitat restoration through this scheme as well. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust have an ongoing project looking at non-native invasive plants across the New Forest, and this has been able to come in and use a chunk of very welcome funding to do lots of extra work, including removing 53 kilometres of Himalayan balsam along riverbanks with the help of 661 volunteers. And that's a huge amount of work, working along 53 kilometres of riverbank. So it's been an absolutely amazing project. It's not just Himalayan balsam, it's also American skunk cabbage and Japanese knotweed and all sorts of other bits and pieces that are causing problems in the New Forest. So fantastic project, a huge amount of effort from volunteers has gone into that. Another project that's been run by the Freshwater Habitats Trust, very, very important area of work in the New Forest where our rivers and streams and ponds are so important. They're some of the best rivers and streams and ponds in the whole of Europe here, and it's so important that we keep them as clean as we possibly can. So with the funding from this project, we've been able to do a lot of survey and monitoring of the watercourses, look to see where the problems are with nitrate and phosphate, for example, pinpoint particular problems and work with farmers and horticulturalists and private landowners to remove muck heaps or put roofs over muck heaps, and put in infrastructure into farmyards, for example, water harvesting infrastructure, which will just keep clean and dirty water separate and help just to reduce pollution into the watercourses. The Forestry England have been managing a very important project, which is all about what we call encroachment onto some of the very important sites around the New Forest, which are kind of on the edges and which I think a lot of people don't think are very important, but still have a hugely important suite of botanical species in them, like chamomile. And what we find is that people park on the verges or put building materials or fly tip on the verges. And this project has been able to go around and really put a lot of resource into measures which help to restore those verges and just raise awareness around residents in the forest in particular about their importance. And then moving on to the Foxborough Reserve, which Rachel mentioned, this is an amazing story. This used to be a conifer plantation up in the north of the forest, and the National Trust bought it some years ago now. And this project has been able to really prime a huge amount of work that they really want to carry on doing over the next few years to restore this site. They've taken down the conifer plantation, and what they've got planned in its place is large areas of heathland and newly planted deciduous woodland, and they've planted actually 18,000 native deciduous trees through this project, which is just incredible, with the help of a large army of volunteers. And they've also been able to put up this fantastic education centre, very in keeping with the environment, with a composting toilet, and it means they can bring children and other people in and carry out education. So just to end with a few statistics, 61 kilometres in total of riverbank and hedgerows restored, 219 hectares of habitats, which includes your woodlands and Foxborough and some of the other habitats that we've talked about, like the grasslands. There are the 18,000 trees planted, and that doesn't include all of the trees that we've planted through better boundaries in the hedgerows, and then total of 60 locations monitored through the Living Waters project. So it's just to end off with an absolutely enormous thank you to the project officers, the volunteers, the landowners, the farmers, the commoners, the countryside contractors, everybody who's been working on these projects. We're extremely proud of what we've achieved. So just to go back and have a look to see whether there are any questions in the chat. Yes, so we've got a question from Michael Whitlock. What happens to these projects once the project ends? Yes, very good question, Michael. Well, luckily, even though our project officer has had to leave because of the end of the project, we do still have our core New Forest Land Advice Service. So that's myself and Tracy and Reese. And we're still here ready to give advice to the farmers and the landowners who own those woodlands and any other woodlands that people have across the forest that they want advice on. And what we're also hoping is that the Ranger Service at the National Park Authority will be able to continue to help us to carry out some of the volunteer events that we've been doing in those woodlands. So we are very much expecting to continue to support people as best we can, even though the project has finished. There's a question here from Caroline about reptile and amphibian monitoring. Yes, we have done some of that on sites where we felt that it was appropriate, including up at Avon Tyrrell, where we were working with the UK Youth Centre to do some heathland restoration through the Nature's Stepping Stones project. So both Angela Peters, the project officer, and also the Biodiversity Monitoring Project they've put corrugated iron and so forth down there so that they can monitor the amphibians and reptiles, and that monitoring will continue. Just looking through to see whether there's anything else. I think those are probably the two questions that came up at the. There's another one here. What plans are in place to continue the fantastic work after OPOV? Yes, well, like I said with the woodlands, it's really the same with many of the other projects that I've covered. Certainly within the New Forest Land Advice Service, we're looking to continue to support as many landowners as we can on the sites where we've been working, although that will be a challenge. And also we are looking into new sources of funding. So we are looking to see whether or not in the very near future we might all be able to work together as a partnership again, bringing in perhaps new partners like the RSPB, who have now kind of come into the forest with their new reserve, and maybe put in a bid for more work to continue with all of this. So that's kind of watch this space. Okay, so I think that ends all of the questions that have come in for me. So I'm just going to pass over now to Hilda, who's going to talk to you about the historic environment and heritage projects that she's been involved with.
Thank you very much, Julie. That was great. Hello, everyone. My name is Hilda van der Heul, and I'm the community archaeologist for the New Forest National Park Authority. I will be talking about the various heritage projects that have been part of Our Past, Our Future. It's going to be a real whistle-stop tour, about 4 projects in 10 minutes, so buckle up. I will just share my slides. So the overarching aims of the heritage projects have been to actively improve knowledge and understanding of the historic environment assets in the New Forest, to support local groups doing their own heritage projects, and to improve public access to all of this information. Some of the involved parties were the New Forest National Park, of course, the New Forest District Council, the New Forest Heritage Centre, various independent heritage groups and NPA volunteers. So for some quick statistics, all of our projects again have been, all of our project targets have been exceeded, which is great. We carried out or supported 58 heritage community projects, engaged over 3,500 people. We did 23 training events with over 600 people, and we had 70 open days. Some of the main project tasks were to survey previously unknown or little known archaeological sites, to carry out conservation work on at-risk heritage assets, to train local groups and volunteers through surveys, excavations, talks and events, to create new self-led heritage walking routes, and to collate and share all of this info in one comprehensive place, which is the New Forest Knowledge website, which I'll be talking about in a minute. So we surveyed over 5,500 hectares of private woodlands and National Trust and Forestry England lands using LiDAR scanning. This is a form of aerial laser scanning, which allows you to digitally strip away any vegetation cover so that you can see earthworks and features, archaeological features that may be underneath tree cover. And this was done to identify and map any archaeological features that would be otherwise difficult to see. So you can see some screenshots from this LiDAR survey here. We then went out with volunteers to ground truth this survey and to record these features. We also did several geophysical surveys on known archaeological sites in and around the New Forest with local heritage groups, such as at Leap Beach, Rockbourne Roman Villa, and at Buckland Rings Iron Age Hill Fort. We also did work to carry out repairs on archaeological features throughout the New Forest, with a specific focus on church monuments, industrial heritage, and Second World War features. We did this to raise awareness about archaeological conservation and encourage long-term management. As Rachel mentioned earlier, monuments have been taken off the Heritage at-Risk Register, which is great. An example of this conservation work is this underground ice house on the Burley estate. These ice houses were used from the early 17th century until the end of the 19th century to store ice, unsurprisingly, and food. It was first laser scanned in order to inform conservation work and provide an educational tool, and then the dome of the ice house was cleaned and repointed with the help of volunteers. The results of the laser scan can be found on the New Forest Knowledge website, which I will talk about a bit later again. Another example of conservation work done through this project is the work done in several New Forest graveyards to make degraded gravestones legible again using a technique called reflective transformation imaging. This example is from All Saints Church in Minstead, and it's just stunning. Local volunteers also carried out data collection from gravestones in these graveyards to be added to an online database being worked on for the New Forest Knowledge website, so that the public can hopefully browse the records very soon. Damaged churchyard monuments were physically repaired as well, which Rachel just mentioned earlier and showed you a few photos of. Another significant part of the heritage work has been community excavations, with the aim to teach groups and volunteers excavation, recording and finds ID skills, and to gather more information about the below ground archaeology of the New Forest. Digs were carried out on the Beauty Estate, at Buckland Rings, in the village of Burley, and at Buckler's Hard. One real highlight here was the excavation of a Bronze Age ring dish monument on the Beauty Estate. 2 seasons were held in 2018 and 2019, with over 40 volunteers in 2019. This monument was thought to be a Bronze Age burial mound, but when the ring ditch was excavated, it turned out to have an entrance gap in it, which you can see on the photo on the left, which raises the question as to whether this was always a simple burial mound, or it may have at some point have been some sort of henge with an internal space. We're still not quite sure, so it's quite enigmatic. Several Bronze Age cremation urns were discovered as well. These were fully analysed at Bournemouth University, and we are actually planning on hopefully going back to rebury them in their original location in the summer, now that we've got all the information that we need from them. The report for this excavation is again on the New Forest Knowledge website. Another dig of note was the community test pitting project in the village of Burley. This was very much done in time team style, as about 50 test pits were dug in people's gardens over a long weekend in 2019, involving many of the residents of Burley. The dig HQ was located at Burley Village Hall, where there were fines washing tables and a fines ID hub. Workshops and talks were also held here in the evenings, and everyone got really involved. So 5 new self-guided walking trails have been developed along old historic routes, which are now rights of way in and around the New Forest National Park. Volunteers analysed historic maps to research around 700 rights of way and looked at historic documents to review what sort of historical features could be found on these routes. Around 260 walking surveys were conducted, a huge amount of work, and eventually 5 new self-led heritage trails were suggested for further development. We have worked with Hampshire County Council and local volunteers to improve the rights of way on these routes, including pedestrian access and signage, and the heritage information has been added to the New Forest Knowledge and New Forest National Park Authority websites. One example is the Tatchbury Trail, which you can see the map of here, which has several historical landmarks along the way, including a Saxon settlement, the location of a possible battle that took place when the Saxons invaded, and it goes around the remains of Tatchbury Iron Age hill fort. So I've already mentioned the New Forest Knowledge website several times now. This is a partnership between the New Forest Heritage Centre and the New Forest National Park Authority. It has been set up as a community portal where individuals and groups of all abilities and interests can add their own research, articles and photographs, and it already has a huge amount of info, and it gets on average 17,000 views now, which is great. One of my favourite features of this website is on the homepage, where you've got a mapping feature. You can turn on all these different data layers with archaeological features, photographs, diary entries, etc. Now there is a video about the New Forest Heritage Centre side of the project, which will hopefully be shown to you now.
Hilda, there's no sound.
So the main aim of the project was to create a website for researchers of all levels and abilities who wanted to access information about the New Forest. So a large part of the project involved collaboration with Forestry England, so we've been able to digitise all of the lease books and atlases and make those available on the New Forest Knowledge website. We've worked closely with the Commoners Defence Association and they're through our Ancestors' Eyes project, and they've got a wonderful archive of commoning photographs and oral histories and transcripts, all available on the website too. So a really nice example of how the collaboration has worked well was a colleague at the National Park Authority alerted us to a collection which we were able to receive. It's World War I material, wonderful collection of photographs. We've been able to digitise those photographs and make them available on the New Forest website, and people have been able to feed more information into the system, so we've learned a lot more about it, which has been really wonderful. The project's been far more successful than we ever could have imagined. We've gone beyond being static collections of objects to generating new ideas and developing new research. Museums are changing, and one of the great successes of the project has been the vast increase in accessibility to our collections. We've been able to tell the stories of the objects and the materials that we have here, and the stories have been able to grow thanks to the input from members of the wider community. And that's not just the local people living in the New Forest, but people far beyond the bounds of the New Forest, both in the UK and abroad. We've had a wonderful team of volunteers who have given around 2,000 days to this project in total over the 4 years. We've enhanced 35,000 catalogue entries and digitised 20,000 items.
I've been cataloguing about 6,000 maps, and we did 45,000 pages. What it gives me as a volunteer is an opportunity to extend my skill set and also my knowledge. I see things and make connections that, had I not done the volunteering, would simply have passed me by.
We walked through the doors on day one and we were faced with the most enormous task. And I think it's now we're really starting to see the fruits of the labour. We're starting to see the connections and the stories and how it all links together. And people are getting excited by what we've discovered, which is really, really lovely. Ultimately, it's about raising awareness so that people can learn and understand more about the New Forest and can therefore protect and preserve it for many more years to come.
So that was it for me. A huge thank you to all the volunteers and heritage groups, and of course the funders, for making it possible for us to do all of this. I will have a quick look to see whether there are any questions again. Right, so we have one question. Will the Greystone deciphering work carry on and the online database continue to be grown? So yes, absolutely, this is still very much going on. The reflective transformation imaging work was done in 5 New Forest graveyards. That is now finished, but we have lots of different spreadsheets with data collected by volunteers, textual data, and the next step is now to connect the images of the gravestones with the textual data and make that publicly browsable, which is a huge task, and we're kind of hoping to maybe get a student placement in, but that's difficult at the moment to arrange with COVID. But absolutely watch this space. We will get it up there, hopefully in the next half year or so. And that is the only question I can see. So I will now hand over to Lindsay Stride, who is going to talk about the Commoning project, but this will start with another film, so you will see that first. Thank you.
Everyone, when they go to visit somewhere, wants to see what's really the essence of the place, and that's what we've tried to do through our projects. So we've had this incredible exhibition which has travelled around the forest, and now we've made it into this mini travelling exhibition so that we can actually get out on the forest and share our commoning lives with people who really are interested, who've come to the forest because they love it. We've invited many groups here to the farm. We've had a lot of National Park staff, rangers, and people from other organisations here, and we've talked to them about our commoning lives so that they better understand the forest. The project has given us a new way of talking about the forest, and I hope that the social media work that we've done, the websites that's been built for the Real New Forest project, the work I've done with schools and with teachers, that they will continue going forward.
For us, the game changer has been the collaborative nature of the OPOF projects. So the shared projects and the partnership is some 12 or 15 different organisations, and we all bring something different to the table, but it's all interconnected. The lottery funding has enabled us to provide training for commoners, both in engaging with the public themselves and using social media to get a message out to a wider audience. And that's been a massive change for commoners, to be able to reach far and wide to people who haven't even arrived at the forest yet is really exciting for us. The hashtag #Add3Minutes campaign has been a significant part of trying to get the winter traffic to slow down and take account of animals on the road, particularly at night time. We've devised a communications calendar which tracks the various messages that are important across the forest at various times of the year, and those are being used now by Forestry England, by the New Forest National Park Authority, the verderers, the CDA, the Animal Accident Reduction Group. By working together, we can actually produce a much more coherent message and a one full story, rather than lots of disparate pieces of information that may or may not reach the audience. The mentoring scheme is a great way for experienced commoners to share their knowledge and the traditions of commoning to the new and younger commoners that join the community. I was paired up with Suzanne, who's a long-term and really experienced commoner, and we did everything from drifting, we beauty road sails, I did some shadow judging with her, and since then I've become an active part of the commoning community. Commoners have always been proud of what they do and their heritage, and this project has given us the confidence and the platform to share our story to a much wider audience.
It's really fantastic to see those images. I'm Lindsay Stride and I'm sat in my kitchen, which is quite apt because over the course of the project, we've hosted many people here in the kitchen and given them cups of tea and had personal conversations. Many people within and beyond the commoning community have helped to make these projects a success. And it's this collaboration, as Katie talked about, that's perhaps its greatest success and will be its greatest legacy. One thing I really want to touch on is, because of the lottery funding, we were able to work with some really fantastic professionals who supported us and helped us to really see what we wanted to say and how to say it. Many people come to the New Forest and they see the beautiful landscape and they see the ponies and the animals and they love it, but they don't see commoners. We are sort of the invisible people behind the ponies and the cows, and there was a void of information, and this project has given us the confidence to tell our own story in our own words. I would like to remind you that there is a Q&A function, so if there's any questions you'd like to ask me or any of the other presenters today, please pop it into the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer. Could we click on to the next slide? So as you saw in the film, 23 young and new commoners have been mentored by 8 commoners. This is a project that we talked about for many years. It's really important that the knowledge and experience within the commoning community is passed on to the next generation. The commoning community is quite transient. It's a property right, not a right that's passed down through the generations. So commoners come and go through the years and through the generations. It's a property right, and you can buy the right to turn your animals out when you buy land or property in the forest. And many people love to join the commoning community, but they need that knowledge and skills and support. One of the workshops that we led came up with a wonderful quote that no one starts alone. There's always someone who takes you under their wing. The mentor scheme helped new commoners gain experience, it helped them build networks, make new friends, and enable them to play a much larger part in the commoning community none more so than Katie, who is now the Secretary of the Commoners Defence Association. Can we move on to the next slide? Whilst commoning has an incredibly important part to play in the future of the forest, it has strong roots in the past. This incredible collection of images and the associated recordings and transcripts, which explain what is happening in the photographs, is a fantastic record of our commoning heritage. This photograph is from our own family collection and shows my husband's great aunts. And in those days, they used to milk their cows, and their small herd of dairy cattle went out on the forest every day. Now, modern dairying wouldn't allow us to turn dairy cows out on the forest, but we still turn our cows out in the same places that our great-grandparents farmed. And this barn looks very, very similar to this day. And it's a wonderful thing to say that we're still doing what those before us have done. I would highly recommend you go to the New Forest Knowledge website and have a browse through the many hundreds of commoning photographs. It's not very often you get to be nosy and look at sort of the lives of ordinary people and listen to them talking about their families. If we could move on to the next slide. So my passion is education. I'm a teacher, I teach forest school, I work with lots of local schools all the time. And it's been fantastic to work with those local schools and different education groups to deliver both this online toolkit, which can be accessed free of charge on the National Park website and on the Real New Forest website. I've been and delivered assemblies for schools. More importantly, I've worked with teachers in their planning sessions to help them understand what they could teach about the forest, what they should teach about the forest. And over the past year, I've enjoyed some really interesting Zoom calls, which work really, really well. School trips are expensive. It's hard work getting kids out of school and into the forest. So the next best thing actually is a Zoom call or a FaceTime live. And I'm on the farm or out in the forest. And that way I can have a quick catch up with a class on perhaps more than one occasion and talk to them about what's happening on the farm and out in the forest through the seasons. Whilst we know the number of children we've engaged directly, it's quite hard to say how many children have benefited in total, as resources are available freely and have been downloaded lots of times from the website. One of the greatest successes has been the opportunity to engage with other education professionals across the forest. And whilst there's a really good wealth of education providers in the forest, many of them didn't talk about commoning, and they felt it wasn't their remit and it wasn't their skill set. And by not talking about it, they omitted to explain its importance to the landscape. So by engaging with them more, by providing them with more resources, I'm hopeful that every education provider in the forest will explain to children and to their visitors exactly how commoning impacts on the species that we see. It's always a gripe of mine, I've been a reception class teacher, that some children can name every dinosaur that walked the earth, but they cannot tell you the names of the species that they see every day in their local environment. They might not know that it's a stone chat on that gorse bush they pass every day. They might not know that we have some extraordinary rare fungi and insects in the forest. So it's really important that we share the magic of the forest with children, because they are the ones who are going to take us on and into the future and protect the forest for years and years and generations to come. Every new forest child should be able to recognise a stone chat perched on a gorse bush. They should be inspired by the incredible relationship between black ants and silver-studded blue butterflies, and in turn the link they have with the heathland management, with grazing, with burning, with the traditional way that we manage our heathlands here in the New Forest. Now the next slide shows one of my favourites. This is Peronea punctata, and I can assure you that every child I've taught through this project will be able to name Peronea punctata. It is an incredible tiny little fungi that you find only on New Forest pony poo. And just recently it's been found on a few reserves beyond the forest, and that's because New Forest ponies have been taken as conservation grazers away from the forest onto other sites. So this is a really tiny little fungi, sometimes known as the nail fungi because it's so tiny. And it's easily spotted, and it's just exciting. Can we move on to the next slide? So another really important part of our work through OPOF has been our work to educate visitors and locals to keep their distance from forest stock, from our ponies, from our cows, our pigs, our sheep and our donkeys. It's all too tempting for people to see the New Forest as somewhere to come and feed the ponies, and that's wrong. Our ponies live their best lives in the forest. They feed on the most incredible variety of food, and they walk over really varied terrain. Interestingly, I was invited to speak at the World Horse Welfare Conference in London at the Royal Geographical Society, which I think is my OPOF highlight. And I was there to talk about the impact ponies can have on a landscape as conservation grazers, but also the benefits that that brings to the pony itself. It's physically fit and healthy. It's eating a really, really varied natural diet. So we're really proud of our ponies. We have an incredible management system here in the forest, which is the envy of commoners, not just across this country, but across the world. We have our system of agisters out looking after the ponies, and we have an amazing community of commoners who all work together all of the time. This pony you can see is grazing in the bog. That keeps the bog in perfect condition. So we've got amazing species like large marsh grasshoppers that we find in the wet heath and into the bogs. We've got southern damselflies. We've got bog asphodels, and a huge number of sphagnum mosses, and I could go on forever. It's really important that visitors understand how special the environment is, how important the ponies are to that environment, so that they can understand when we say, please don't feed the ponies, please keep your distance from the animals. And this project has given us the resources and the time and the skills to be able to do that. And you can see this little resource that goes in the toolkit that helps kids kind of figure out that. A lot of the work we've done has been about addressing misconceptions. If we move on to the next slide. So 61 businesses have advised their employees about safe driving in the forest. They've signed a charter, and we update them regularly with newsletters so that they can keep their staff informed. Many vehicles cross the forest roads. Now, interestingly, most accidents are caused by smaller vehicles, cars and small vans. And through this part of the project, we were able to reach out to thousands of local drivers. Now, what we need to do is change the behaviour of the majority of drivers so that they all slow down. Reducing your speed to 30 miles per hour rather than 40 will only add 3 minutes to an average 7-mile journey, which is where the Add 3 Minutes campaign was born. With local businesses sporting these I Go Slow for Pony stickers, which they helped to design and which they've added to their vehicle liveries, we're able to continuously drip feed that message to drivers, but also for the driver driving that vehicle, which says I Go Slow for Ponies, that driver knows that they need to drive carefully past a pony, otherwise there might be a report to their company. So in lots of ways, this hits the behaviour change messages and strategies. Several of these businesses allowed us to talk to their staff in the early days of the project and really give us an insight as to driver behaviour. So some messages came across which were quite interesting. most accidents happen on long straight roads, and yet most drivers think that the dangerous parts are the bendy roads or the roads where there's lots of vegetation. So knowing that helps us work out our campaigns and help us to tell people, give people the right messages. Again, we talk about collaboration. So the Add 3 Minutes campaign, as Katie said in the video, has been taken up by all local organisations. So we have a consistent message. We move on to the next slide. So those messages we've been able to share through social media. And it's really, really hard to tell someone that they're doing the wrong thing when they get here. If they can access information before they visit, and they know that when they come to the forest, they need to keep their distance from the ponies, they need to drive with care, then we're halfway there already. Commoners were very fearful of social media and the negative stories they encountered there. Having worked with Social Jungle, it soon became clear that the lack of information about commoning from reliable, trusted sources left a void for other, less knowledgeable people to fill. So we provided commoners with social media training and have, over the course of the project, developed a number of social media feeds which are now highly regarded and are the place where people go for information about commoning. The CDA has also developed a fantastic website which informs and challenges misconceptions about commoning and commoners in the New Forest. And I would highly recommend you go and have a look at our social media feeds, follow us there. Lots of us have personal social media feeds so that you can follow our own personal stories. You move on to the next slide, please. So my another part of the project that I was very heavily involved in is developing the Commoning Voices exhibition. So going back to those first conversations about social media, lots of people talked about commoning and about commoners, but it was never commoners talking for themselves. It was never their voice. So we, and again, much of the work that was being done was focused on the problems that we see because of commoning, pony feeding, road accidents. But it became clear during the project that people are unlikely to change their behaviour if they do not understand the benefits of commoning to the forest and those that use it. Before joining OPOF, commoners were often talked about rather than to, their voices rarely heard. They were essentially invisible. The Commoning Voices project gave commoners the chance to share the forest as they know it and as they see it. Every element of the exhibition evolved from the stories told by commoners in our early workshops. Our very first workshop was here at our house, and at about 11:30, I had to ask everyone to leave, because once you start a commoner talking, it's really, really hard to get them to stop. They love to tell stories, they love to wind each other up, and it was a surprise to us that whilst this was an interpretation project, it also had really important social elements for the commoning community. Each part of the Commoning Voices exhibition is commoners' own words. So you can see the captions on the pictures there. They're all their words. I added a little tiny bit of interpretation, but mostly it's their words. But we also used their voices. So we had PIRs attached to the exhibition. So when you walked by, you could hear the commoners' own voices. And people commented on the exhibition that they love to hear those authentic local accents. We will continue to tell our own stories and are very proud that the work we've begun in this project will be carried forward, not just by the CDA, but by other forest organisations such as Forestry England and National Park Authority. And over the next few years, we'll be taking our new temporary exhibition around perhaps to local campsites, to local pubs, so that we can carry on that conversation with people. Next slide, please. So a final thank you. Please pop any questions in the chat. Follow us on social media and take a look at the Real New Forest website. A big thank you to the lottery, to our partner organisations and to the commoners themselves. They had to be brave we had to open up our kitchen. We had to tell the story of our lives, and that takes courage, and we are grateful for that. And a very big thank you to everyone who's followed us on social media, who's visited the exhibition, everyone who's added 3 minutes to their car journeys across the forest, everyone who keeps their distance from the forest animals. We all love the forest, and together we can keep it special. I'm going to pass on now to Gilly, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about the projects that she's been involved with. And she's going to be talking about training through the scheme.
Thanks, Lindsay. Good afternoon, my name is Julie Molland. I'm the lead ranger for New Forest National Park Authority, and as Lindsay said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the work that was done in regard to training throughout the OPOF scheme. So I will just share my screen with you now. So as you can see, there were 4 projects under the theme of developing forest skills, which aim to retain, develop, share knowledge and skills required for the sustainable management of the new forest habitats and built heritage. These were the new forest rural skills, building skills, veteran tree skills and the apprentice rangers. The Rural Skills Project was a collaboration between New Forest Land Advice Service and the Commoners Defence Association. Training courses were provided to attract commoners, land managers and farmers across the New Forest and upskill as many individuals as possible. Working with Sparshot College and other local training providers, a variety of courses were delivered on land management, livestock management, practical rural skills such as coppicing, and technical qualifications such as tractor driving. In total, the project ran 92 courses with 938 spaces being filled by 443 individuals. Another part of the project was the mentoring scheme, which was mentioned by Lindsay in her previous presentation. The Veteran Tree Skills Project was led by the New Forest National Park Authority, which provided up-to-date training to 36 tree surgeons and tree officers on the specialist care and management of the ancient and veteran trees across the forest. The third project was building skills. To help conserve and enhance the distinctiveness of the New Forest settlements, the National Park Authority provided subsidised courses, raising awareness and encouraging sensitive repair and management of local historic buildings. So 2 sets of courses were designed, one for professionals attracting architects, builders, chartered surveyors and structural engineers, and also one for homeowners. As you can see, 114 professionals attended and 119 homeowners. The 4th project was the Apprentice Ranger Scheme, which I'm super proud to have been able to have managed, and we saw 6 apprentices trained working with 5 of the key ranger teams across the New Forest. We'll now show you a short video to give you a bit more information, followed by some words from one of our previous apprentices and now North Area Ranger Hayden Bridgman.
As far as I know, it's quite a unique apprenticeship. The more traditional apprenticeship is with just one organisation. I think having seen what a great wealth of ranger teams we have in the forest, so all doing their own unique work, but complementing each other, it was a no-brainer to be able to make the most of that and have the apprentices spend placements with each organisation. So Hampshire County Council, Hampshire Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, the National Trust, Forestry England, and then ourselves, the National Park Authority. They get to work doing the practical habitat management, which is crucial for the forest. They get to do some of the public engagement. They get to run events, and also then learning about how a country park such as Leap runs as well. As well as the practical experience that they get through the partnership, they also do a training element, which is with Kingston Moorwood College down in Dorchester. So 1 day a week for 12 weeks. So they get all elements of the ranger role.
It really lets you get an idea of what each organisation has and their priorities and how they work. And you get to forge relationships with each partner, which I think is really beneficial.
It's been lovely to see that our apprentices have maybe finished, gone away to other jobs, sometimes within the national park, and then also we're now seeing the likes of Jake and Hayden who are coming back and being able to get more full-time jobs within the national park. So we're keeping those skills within the forest, which is a real achievement and credit to the scheme itself. It's wonderful to see them progress through the apprenticeship. I think just watching them grow, both kind of personally and professionally, they've all come with masses of enthusiasm, and to see that passion and enthusiasm still there at the end of it shows that, you know, they've really enjoyed it.
I think it's the variety and the variety of every task. You know, everything's different every day, something new. You know, you could be burning the heath one day to chainsawing the next day to running events with the MPA education team. Yeah, it's such a wide variety, and also you're working alongside people that love what they do. You know, everybody loves being here. You know, it's not a chore for any of us to get out of bed in the morning.
Kind of doesn't feel real almost. It's been a spectacular year, honestly. I keep saying I feel like a completely different person at the end of it, in like the best way possible. I feel like I've grown. I feel like I've got so many new skills, and I've met so many fantastic people.
The apprenticeships really do allow them to get that experience and that knowledge, which a lot of us as employers are looking for. We want people with experience, but you can't get a job without experience. So the apprenticeship really gives them that first step on the ladder into the industry.
Hi everyone, so I'm Hayden and I was one of the lucky apprentices in 2018 to 2019. It came at a really great time for me personally. I'd just finished university studying photography, and I had a bit of a quarter-life crisis at 21, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. So I went and volunteered for 6 weeks on a conservation project abroad, and it turned out to be 3 years of the best work. And I came home after doing 3 years of volunteering and doing seasonal work and internships, and came home to pursue a career and hopefully earn some money doing it. And that's when I saw the apprenticeship come up, and I managed to secure it. And the great thing is, like you saw in the video, is just how broad the scheme is and how much you really get to be a part of it. You get to be in the field whilst getting those qualifications. And as I was applying for roles, a lot of the feedback that I was getting was you just need that little bit more experience, or you need that little bit, those qualifications. So that's what the apprenticeship really does. And I finished the apprenticeship and I felt like I was a really competitive candidate. It gives you so many connections and the confidence and a real understanding of the sector that you're going into, whether it's for a government organisation or a charity, and it enables you to be really flexible and adapt, which I think now more than ever is really important, so it doesn't just pigeonhole you into one particular role. So I finished the apprenticeship and landed a role as an assistant ranger down at Leap Country Park, which was really great because I was able to stay local. And then, having been there for a year, my dream job opened up as North Area Ranger, and it's still a real pinch me moment that I'm able to say that I landed that role as a full-time, permanent member of staff. My role at the minute is working, well, if COVID wasn't a thing, it would be working with landowners and stakeholders to help protect the special place, and working with a lot of people that I was able to work with on the apprenticeship. So whether that's through education or engagement or events, at the minute we're doing a lot of patrolling and looking for any antisocial behaviour, any pressures that are on the forest. And yeah, other apprentices have gone on to be a wildlife keeper with Forestry England, seasonals that have managed to do many seasons, not just one season, groundskeeper, and actually live-in rangers up at RSPB in Franchises Lodge. So yeah, I really can't thank the scheme enough, and I'll pass our future in the National Park, because it really enabled me to carry on doing what I love and really gave me that confidence and that career to keep going with it. And I wish that everyone that wanted to have a career in conservation could do this apprenticeship, because yeah, it's really changed my life, and I'm so excited that it's able to continue going for another year with some funding. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'll now pass back to Gilly.
Thanks, Hayden, and great just to see obviously the passion that we have from the apprentices, and I think also that passion is shared by all of the staff kind of involved and all the partners as well. So I'm also really pleased to be able to say, as a legacy of the Op-Off Apprenticeship Ranger Scheme, is that we've found some additional funding from elsewhere, and we're actually able to continue the scheme for another year. So just over this past week, we have been advertising and interviewing for the next cohort of 2 apprentices, and I will continue to work to try and find any future funding to keep the scheme going. So we're really pleased to be able to welcome RSPB as a partner as well going into the future. So definitely a scheme that we want to keep within the forest. So now let's see if there are any questions to answer. So I don't think there are any in particular here. So I will pass back to Rachel for the second poll. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gilly and Hayden. Yeah, back to me just briefly. As you know, we're having these live polls running through. So the second poll has been launched for a while. A few people have already answered it. So I think the link to that is in the Q&A session. So if you haven't done the second poll yet, please do have a look at that and answer it. I'm just going to show you the results that are coming in at the moment. I've been keeping my eye on this throughout. So you can see there, the question was, from what you know about the scheme, what aspects of the New Forest have benefited most? And obviously you've been hearing about all the benefits from some of the presentations we've had so far, and it's looking like out there at the front, people are seeing that the work we're doing on biodiversity and nature conservation has been of great importance, and also the volunteering opportunities. So that's really good to see. There will be a final poll coming up in a bit, but we have still got some more presentations, a couple more. We may be running over a bit, just I hope that's okay with everybody. It looks like we'll be going over 3:30, which was our original end date, but finish time, sorry. So next up we have got it's a communications slideshow, so it's 3 minutes long to music, and it's just to sit back and watch it really, and it's just to demonstrate what sort of media coverage we've had over the last 5 years, some sort of highlights of that, and also Instagram and Facebook coverage and other social media. So it's just sort of sit back and watch some of the key things that have been reported in the media for us. That's going to be for 3 minutes, and then after that we should be going straight in to another presentation by Richard Austin, who is going to talk about the volunteering that's happened over the last 5 years. So I'll just now hand over to Maria, who's going to play the comms slideshow for us. Thank you.
Hello everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I am Richard Austin. I'm the volunteer coordinator for the National Park. I've been brought on 5 years ago for the beginning of the delivery stage of the scheme, and I've been helping with volunteering and also rural skills and the building skills project as well. Yeah, if we could move on to the next slide, please. So at the beginning of the scheme, we created 7 volunteer roles, covering wildlife conservation, archaeology and heritage and events as well. I've chosen this photo because it represents the volunteer fair, which is a fantastic event to recruit volunteers, and that was really useful for us at the beginning of the scheme, and we've done that every year since. For those of you who've been to the event will know it's a very popular and successful event, and it's great for us to recruit volunteers there. And that was the first place that we were able to advertise our roles, which we did at public facing events as well as online social media and in local press articles as well. Next slide, please. So volunteering began, and those of you who were with us from the beginning will know that volunteering began in small numbers, but increased quite quickly, and certainly through 2017, 2018, it really started to take off as more opportunities were put on and more sites were brought on board, and more opportunities were available for volunteers to get involved. So we've certainly found that lots of volunteers are starting to volunteer and continuing to come back and volunteer with us. Next slide, please. I wanted to include a slide here about working as a partnership, because I think it's really important to emphasise the benefits for everyone being involved in a partnership scheme. As for organisations' point of view, it really shows that we can work together. We're not in competition with each other, and the volunteer fair shows that there are thousands of volunteers, people waiting to volunteer and help out with the New Forest National Park. So that was fantastic on the point of view for the organisations, but in terms of volunteering, it also gave us an opportunity for volunteers to have a wider range of opportunities with all the organisations there on the screen. Certain volunteers volunteered across many different projects. I think the record was 6 different projects for one volunteer and 5 different organisations, and many volunteers took the opportunity to make the most of that. All our volunteering is ad hoc, so we had no time commitment required, which is a real benefit for the volunteers. And next slide, please. Luckily for me, Hilda's covered this in great detail, so I won't go into too much detail here, but just to emphasise that archaeology is obviously a very important part of the heritage side of the scheme, and great opportunities were on offer for volunteers to get involved in, particularly these 2 projects. And as Hilda mentioned, they made some incredible discoveries throughout that scheme, in particular the Bronze Age barrows, the boundary banks, the charcoal pits, and restoring places like Burley Ice House and the Keyhaven Salt Works. A huge variety of projects went on throughout the 5 years, so fantastic work by volunteers there. Next slide, please. Next is the Academy project, which, as you saw in the film, was just a fantastic project right from the beginning. It had a real committed group of volunteers involved, 13,000 hours in total for volunteers, giving us one of the highest totals of any project, and a real committed group, as I say, volunteering many hours to help digitise lots of documents. Over 20,000 items have been catalogued so far. And again, I'd recommend visiting the New Forest Knowledge website, which hopefully can be put in the Q&A function. That's constantly being updated with loads of resources, so I would recommend having a look there. Next slide, please. The Historic Routes project gave an opportunity for volunteers to investigate existing rights of way and identify those with significant historical importance. So I've chosen a photo here of a nice sunny day in Rockford Common, where we did one of our walkover surveys, and throughout the scheme they narrowed down hundreds of rights of way to 5 in particular, which Hilda mentioned. And again, I'd recommend looking at our website for more information on these routes and going having a walk along and see what you can find along them. Again, a fantastic opportunity for volunteers. Over 2,000 hours were given to this project alone. Next slide, please. We also covered a lot of wildlife conservation projects, and Living Waters is one of the most successful ones. We had 35 volunteers monitoring the water quality of the freshwater habitats across the New Forest. They used to go out every other month to test for nitrates and phosphates. Again, a fantastic project with a real committed group of volunteers, over 1,500 hours given to that project, where we can map the water quality of the New Forest. For the non-native plants project, over 16,000 hours were given to this project alone. And if any of you have seen Catherine Chatter's and her presentation, you'll see just how much of an impact they've had in that scheme. 53 kilometres of riverbank has been cleared of Himalayan balsam, and from many of the site visits they've gone on this year, they've gone back to sites where they can't find any balsam at all, really. So it's fantastic, the impact that that's made over 5 years, and it's good to see that they will continue this summer as well, which is really good news. Beyond the end of drop-off, they will continue that scheme. So next slide, please. Okay, I just wanted to touch on 3 of the wildlife conservation projects, and these projects were led by Land Advice Service. As Jules mentioned earlier, Better Boundaries was a project which really focused on boundary features of the national park, particularly in the western escarpments. Over 4,000 metres of hedgerow were restored, and volunteers got involved in planting up gaps and hedges, removing scrub such as bracken. Over 500 hours are given to this project, a very successful project indeed. For the Nature Stepping Stones projects, we had 28 sites of importance for nature conservation, more than 44 hectares of grassland and heathland, over 2,600 hours given by volunteers to this project, and they cleared bracken and gorse and bramble. Again, very successful project and fantastic commitment by volunteers to really restore those sites. And likewise with the Work in Woodlands projects, that was really to help landowners restore their woodlands and sustainably manage them. And we had over 130 hectares restored over more than 20 sites in that project. Again, clearing things like birch and rhododendron, lots of invasive species being cleared, and 5,000 hours given to that project. So collectively, these projects really help to provide habitat for invertebrates, birds and mammals across the national park. Next slide, please. And on that note, just to touch on the biodiversity monitoring project, volunteers were trained up in survey techniques for bumblebees and birds and bats and butterflies. And some real highlights there, noticing some of the bat species were present. I think Jules also mentioned this, but the barber-cell bat was found on one of our sites, and notable bird species such as bullfinch and cuckoo, kingfisher, linnet and the spotted flycatcher were also noted as well. So fantastic findings on our sites, and I think overall the trend was a real increase in activity of bats and birds across a lot of our sites, which was fantastic. And next slide, please. I want to include some facts and figures, just because part of the reporting stage of these schemes is totting up all the hours, and we've recorded an amazing 70,000 hours through the scheme, which is incredible. So thank you to all of you who've contributed to that time. As I say, over 2,000 volunteers involved in the scheme, and as you can see, over 140 volunteers have given more than 100 hours, which is fantastic. And thank you to all of you who've given your time to the scheme. Next slide, please. I want to include a slide about making a difference, because the photos on the left just show a site at the beginning of the day and the site at the end of the day. This is Harrywood in Branscore. And such a dramatic change in just the space of a day is amazing, just how much we can achieve. That second photo might look quite dramatic, but actually when we went back in the summer, that site is now covered in a sort of green carpet of heather coming up, which is fantastic. Again, we just see the impact volunteers can make in such a short amount of time. So thank you to everyone. Next slide, please. Yeah, mental health and well-being are 2 words that probably have been spoken about a lot recently, and when we question volunteers about getting some feedback, often the primary reason for volunteering is not necessarily directly related to mental health and well-being, but I think it actually becomes one of the most important reasons for volunteers to continue volunteering. Things like being active, being connected to nature, and meeting new people, making friends, being productive, feeling healthier and learning new skills, all of that is wrapped up in mental health and well-being. So I think fantastic way of doing that is volunteering. I think I want to emphasise the importance of that, and volunteering plays a really important role in people's mental health and well-being. Next slide, please. So also covered in the graph that Rachel showed at the beginning, the benefits of volunteering, as we've covered earlier, but the top three there I think are really proof that actually once you learn more about a place, you'll feel more inspired to want to look after it. I think that's really a strong message coming through there, that people really enjoy the learning aspect of what we've been teaching people about the forest, and therefore want to continue to help and preserve it and conserve it as well. So that's fantastic news for us, and hopefully we can continue that beyond the end of the scheme. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd include quite a few quotes, probably too many to read, but I think what's really coming through here, the emphasis on meeting like-minded people, learning new skills, things like coppicing and hedge laying, and just seeing the difference. I think that's really important in terms of the motivation for volunteers to see the difference that they make. I really like that top quote about being part of a team. I think that's really something to emphasise, is that from the start, really, we want to be part of a team and really encourage that feeling of working together towards one goal. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to show a short film of volunteering, and I'd like to quickly just thank Catherine Chatters and Joe Shorrocks for being part of this film.
Without volunteers, we really couldn't achieve anything we wanted to achieve within the Landscape Partnership Scheme. The scheme has attracted hundreds of volunteers. They've removed invasive species such as rhododendron and Himalayan balsam. They've been out doing archaeological digs and geophysical surveys. They've also been researching historical maps and historical documents and photographs in our museum. And they've also been restoring our meadows and woodlands and hedgerows as well across the New Forest.
We rely totally on volunteers to achieve what we do in terms of the Himalayan balsam control, which is where they do most of their work for us. We're so grateful to them. We've had, I totted it up this morning, we had over 11,000 hours of volunteer time over the 5 years of the Our Past, Our Future project.
Yeah, there are so many benefits to this volunteering. Obviously, you've got the fresh air, you've got the exercise, you've got the company, but it is the education side for me particularly. The people that run these tasks are experts in their field, and they're very happy to pass on their knowledge. It helps you to appreciate what's around you a lot more, and perhaps understand what's around you a lot more. So I do feel it's effectively a form of mindfulness that you don't necessarily know that you're doing, but you are.
I think it gives volunteers a kind of greater sense of the importance of the forest and how the forest works and how it works as one landscape. They get to see many parts of the forest they've never seen before, and all while doing it in a kind of a social and safe environment as well. I think it's fantastic for volunteers to get out there and make the most of our opportunities, really.
I think we've all benefited in terms of how it's really helped everybody's mental health, feeling you're doing something useful and you've got a role to play. I think a lot of people have found that a really positive aspect of volunteering.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I've got one question here about volunteers have benefited so much from the scheme. Are there any ways we can help attract, secure future funding to this invaluable work? So yes, I mean, hopefully we are obviously in process of writing funding bids, and it would be fantastic if we can continue to fund volunteering. We still have plans to continue volunteering without funding, but hopefully we can submit some more bids in the near future. In terms of anything to support that, it'd be fantastic to get any feedback from volunteers. Would be a great way of supporting any funding bids. So if we do have any feedback that we can use to support our funding bids, then I would really encourage that. If you could email me, that'd be fantastic. But we have received lots of positive feedback from volunteers already, which we will use for our funding bids. So Okay, I think that's the only question I can see, so I will hand back to Rachel.
Okay, just back to me again briefly. So yeah, we've now got the third question for the live polls. Has been up for a while now, and quite a few of you have already answered that one. And I will just share the screen again to show you the results that were coming in, just so you get an idea of what everybody's saying. So yeah, so this question was, what do you think are the biggest challenges in the New Forest that future projects should address? And you can see there the type of answers that are coming in. Early on when answers coming in, climate change was really big, and now visitor pressure seems to be taken over on what people are thinking actually. So it's really interesting to see what those challenges are, because these are all things that we can look at. You know, Richard said we're talking about future bids, future projects, and we can be trying to build some of this in any future work that we do. So that's the end of the polls, all three of them. So thank you everybody who input into those polls. We will be doing the prize draws after the event has finished, and I'll contact the people who have won those lovely hampers probably tomorrow. So thank you for all doing that. And now I'm going to pass back to Patrick, who's got some concluding comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. So there you have it. Well done, and thanks to all our presenters. Thanks also to Sam for all his work and patience in helping us get to this end result. I mean, this is the point where normally there would be, very loud applause and lots of appreciation for all your efforts as presenters. But I'm afraid on this occasion you have to make do with virtual applause. However, I've made arrangements for Alexa and Siri just to be checking which of our viewers actually do provide some applause, and you'll get the feedback. But well done to all our presenters. Thank you so much for all your hard work. There was a lot of information to absorb in a short time, but hopefully you'll agree that the scheme has successfully delivered on an amazing cross-section of projects, all of which have helped to meet the original objectives of restoring habitats and heritage sites, giving people new skills and inspiring a new generation to champion and care for the New Forest. Whilst it's sad that the scheme is drawing to a close, you've heard from several speakers about the importance of ensuring that all the great things that have been achieved aren't left to wither on the vine. And indeed, there have been some questions in the Q&A bar along those lines as well. So really, we're talking about legacy, and it's crucial that legacy arrangements are put in place to preserve and indeed expand on the great work that's been done. These legacy plans have been at the forefront of our partners' thinking for the last 12 months or so, and many of the projects, as you've heard, have secured the necessary resources to continue working into the future. Now, in addition to that, a memorandum of understanding has recently been agreed by all the partners. This MOU provides a framework for ongoing joint working on agreed priorities, also for potential joint funding bids, and also for the introduction of new partners who weren't part of the original OPOF scheme. We all know that protecting the forest's special qualities requires genuine partnership working in order to achieve ambitious things at the necessary landscape scale. This MOU will help to solidify the OPOF-inspired partnership working well into the future. Now, at the end of such a long and complex series of projects, there is an enormously long list of people and organisations to acknowledge and thank. Rachel has already paid tribute to our funding partners, obviously without whom none of this would have been possible. I'd just like to reiterate and express additional gratitude to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and in particular to our scheme monitor, Claire Thirlwell. Claire, I know you were on the call, I hope you still are. Claire has always been supportive of the OPOF work and has shown great flexibility in helping us deal with various challenges along the way, not least COVID-19. Our presenters have also thanked those delivery partners involved in their individual projects. And I was going to take a minute just to highlight one particular group, but Richard has done it so eloquently. But I wanted to add my thanks to our volunteers. You know, really big shout out to you all. You've turned out in huge numbers, in rain and shine, indoors and outdoors, to provide knowledge and experience, elbow grease, and a wonderful commitment to getting things done. Without you, the OPOF achievements would have been a fraction of what was possible. And I suspect that there's a lot of pent-up volunteer frustration and energy waiting to be unleashed. And we all look forward to welcoming you back as soon as the circumstances allow. Finally, successful projects of this magnitude don't come together by accident. There's been an enormous amount of work behind the scenes by the project staff, and in particular by the op-off delivery manager, Rachel Gallagher, and also her finance and admin assistant, Denise Allen. On behalf of everyone involved in the scheme, a huge thank you for all that organising, chasing, form filling and report writing. We wouldn't have got it done without you. So now we come to the time where we close this webinar, and a final thank you to everyone out there for your support and for giving up some of your time to help us acknowledge and celebrate the success that the op-off scheme has been. A very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you.